مهرباني وکړئ.
شفقه جان غونډه پیلو. او شفقه جان که په وروستي کې په لومړي کې له ټولو غوښتنه وکړي چې مایکونه بند وساتي او کمرې آن وساتي او غونډه ریکارډېږي او په فیسبوک هم لایو.
زه یې پیلوم.
ته پیل کې بیا به رایله جان شورای معرفي کې بیا وروسته به دغه پسې دغه ته لومړی کولی شي دغه ونه چې رایله جان دغه غونډه پیلوي بیا وروسته کولی شي خپل پانل شروع کړي.
Assalamu alaikum. Good morning or good evening. I don't know who is where. I hope everyone is doing very well. Welcome to today's discussion. Naila Jana, am I right?
Yeah, Naila.
Naila will be introducing the organization and then we will start with our own discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Shafiqa Jan. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Thomas. Thank you, Richard, Hasina Jan, Mahbooba Jan, for your time and your attendance. I would like to, I'm sorry that I'm on the car and moving somewhere. I would like to introduce the Afghan Diaspora Global Council very briefly before we start the conference. The Afghan Diaspora Global Conference is a global diaspora council is a global organization. We are trying to build unity about Afghan diaspora, intellectual diaspora from around the world. It's not only from the diaspora community, we also would like to mobilize the Afghans from around Afghanistan as well. And the people who are attending, they are all from all walks of lives. And we have a very simple structures of the different commissions, like commissions of youth, commissions of peace, women commission, refugee commission, economic commissions, commissions of media, and they are all working throughout the countries where the diaspora are living to see that how we can provide better services for mobilizations and build unity among Afghans who are caring about Afghanistan's development process. And we would like to see that how they can be, how the diaspora, Afghan Diaspora Global Council can be the bridge, play the role of the bridge building among all the diaspora from all walks of lives, and to see that how to build unity and how to contribute for the process of development of Afghanistan in an effective and efficient way, and play a very transparent role to provide services for Afghanistan. But it all done through the building unity of our Afghan community. We are in a day that it is one day after a very sad days of collapse of Afghanistan government, and that we all know that how violence have been affected people of Afghanistan. And so Richard and Thomas and Hasina Jan and Mahbooba Jan, we would like to see that what are the way forward that we can help Afghanistan to get out of this struggle and this problem. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Naila Jane. I'm so sorry for pronouncing your name, Naila. Again, she's my cousin. Thank you, Rahila Jane. So welcome again. I hope my voice is fine and everyone can hear. When the Taliban took over Afghanistan in 15th of August 2021, millions of lives dramatically changed. Thousands of people went into exile and thousands of others still trying to flee the country. This dramatic change that happened over only a few days left everyone in shock. Afghan women felt an imminent threat not for their physical safety, but for the future of themselves and their daughters. The Taliban have imposed rights violating policies that have created huge barriers to women's and girls' health, education, curtailed their freedom of movement, expression, and association, and deprive many from their economic and political rights. A study shows that in 2020, nearly 10 million Afghan children, 40% of them girls, were going to schools. But today, Afghanistan is the only country in the whole world where girls are denied their basic human right of education. It has been a year since the young girls were banned from attending secondary schools, and a recent study of the UNICEF shows that that has cost over $500 million for the Afghan economy. Moreover, in the past year, there is a drastic decrease in women's employment. A study by the International Labour Organization this year documented a disproportionate drop in women's employment in Afghanistan, 16% in the months immediately following the Taliban took over. In contrast, in male employment dropped by 6%. This is quoted by Al Jazeera. Recently, the World Bank noted in a survey that 42% of women-owned businesses were temporarily closed in Afghanistan. However, by 2020, total licensed and unlicensed businesses owned by women were 57,000 in Afghanistan. By 2020, 21% of Afghan civil servants were women, 16% of them in senior management positions, and 27% of Afghan members of parliament were women. Like any other field, women's presence is also weakened. In civil service, there is no women's affairs ministry, no member of cabinet, and women's political participation is effectively removed. According to the same recent reports, women in the civil service positions were asked to be replaced by their male member of their family. There are also only a few sectors and particular roles that women can work, otherwise they're restricted to their homes. The presence of women in media is dramatically decreased and were forced to veil their faces. In their recent report, Human Rights Watch noted that since the Taliban took over, most women in Afghanistan cited serious mental health consequences, including fear and anxiety, hopelessness, insomnia, and a deep sense of loss and helplessness. A 43-year-old woman who used to work for 17 years in civil service and now is not allowed to attend her job told Al Jazeera that in the country where I built my life, my career, my daughter does not even have a future. I feel like we have been buried in a dark hole. I am breathing, but I am not alive. Today in this discussion, we will be looking at women's situation in Afghanistan, what has changed for them in the past year, why did this happen, and what are the ways to go forward? What are the responsibility of Afghans in exile and diaspora, and the responsibility of international community? How do we get Afghan women? We will be discussing how do we get Afghan women out of this dark hole. So thank you, gentlemen and ladies, for joining us in today's discussion. And we have some amazing panelists with us today from different fields. We have Mahbooba Jana Siraj, women rights advocate who chose to stay in Afghanistan Last year, we have Richard Bennett, US Special Reporter on Afghanistan. We have Hasina Safai, former Women Affairs Minister in Afghanistan, and we have Thomas Nicholson, AU Special Envoy for Afghanistan. In the first session, we will be generally looking at women's situation. In the next phase, we will be looking at the ways forward. How do we help them? And then we will be also taking some questions from the audience. My first question was for Mahbooba Jan Saraj, and I don't know whether she joined us or not, because previously, a few minutes ago, she was not here. I think she's still not here. So I will ask
Shafiqa, I think you're muted.
was the Banso.
Oh, my apologies. I'm very bad with machines. Mr. Bonnet, I will then ask my first question from you. Considering or evaluating this reality in Afghanistan, how do you analyze UN's engagement in the past 1 year, especially after the fall of Kabul, and specifically in women's statistics?
Well, thank you, Shafiqa, for first of all, thank you to the Afghan Diaspora Global Council for inviting me to participate on this panel in this very important event, and thank you for your introduction and also your presentation of rather depressing statistics regarding women over the last year. In terms of the role of the international community over the last year, I just like to begin maybe with a joint statement that I was part of in the last couple of days from the UN special procedures, of which I am one, and 15 of my colleagues joined me in this statement. And in respect of what you said, we said that in August 2021, the international community, we said, would be judged on our actions, our fortitude, and our willingness to make our words about rights have meaning in this decisive moment. And a year later, we are saying the same thing. We reiterate the call. And because despite numerous commitments made to uphold human rights and women's rights, the Taliban have failed not only to deliver on their promises, they've also reversed much of the progress made in the past 2 decades. And I'm not going to repeat or review what you and I have said, Shafiqa, and I'm sure others will say about the situation of Afghan women now, only to say that what we said was that nowhere else in the world has there been as widespread, systematic, and all-encompassing an attack on the rights of women and of girls. Every aspect of their lives is being restricted under the guise of morality and through the instrumentalization of religion, and that discrimination and violence cannot be justified on any grounds. We've called on the international community and the UN to do many things, and on the Taliban to reverse their policies. But one thing, and due to this being a short panel, I'll mention, is that we call for support for the ongoing initiatives of Afghan women leaders and thinkers, as well as other civil society groups, including women human rights defenders to implement under Afghans, design and implement under Afghan women's leadership a strategy, and not only to promote the rights of women and girls, but to continue their leadership. I would say that when it comes to resistance and leadership, it's being largely led by women. And I think that women are fighting not only for their rights, but for a better Afghanistan for all. And it's also, I think, important for Afghan men to join with women leadership in this regard. When it comes to the UN, I think there are issues at the political level and at the technical level. At the political level, there needs to be further recognition of women. There was a urgent debate at the Human Rights Council in June. Next month, in September, there's going to be another debate, what's called an enhanced interactive dialogue. And once again, Afghan women will have a chance to speak directly to all the member states. There are 57 members of the Human Rights Council, but all of the countries that make up the United Nations will be present in Geneva. And I want to see as many Afghan women as possible expressing what life is like for them and what needs to be done to make it better. And then finally, at the technical level, I think the UN can do more to make it easy for Afghans, and particularly Afghan women, to access the financial support that they need to be able to implement the projects that they have designed, not to make it too difficult in diaspora, for example, to register your organization, to apply for funds, but rather to facilitate the efforts that you are making to support Afghans everywhere by making the path much easier. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We will come back to you. So I will give the floor to Hasina Jan Safai, who was the Women Affairs Minister in Afghanistan and also remained the Culture Minister in Afghanistan, work in the high official level in the country. Hasina Jan, one of the important aspects that now, one of the important fields that now women are facing limits, or it's even being completely denied to them, is the justice part of the justice and judiciary system. We had women judges in Afghanistan, we had defense lawyers, and other women were active in that. But when the Taliban took over Kabul, their first target was to abolish laws and shut down supreme entities for women's rights protections. How do you evaluate women's access to justice in Afghanistan in current situation, especially in the one past year?
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you very much, Ms. Bulwak. I'm honored to see our young poet, whom we have been hearing all the time. I'm very honored to have you as a moderator. Best of luck. I would also like to recognize Shabnam Jan's coordination for the opportunity to participate in today's discussion, and congratulate Afghan Global Diaspora Council for this timely event. And greetings to all the respected and honored participants, Richard, Thomas, Raila Jan, Eژna Sahib, and everyone who I know or not. Thank you for the opportunity. Definitely it is a disastrous a week or a week and a half for all of us, maybe from the beginning of August. Those who have dedicatedly worked, it's tough as day passes, and so does for me. As a women minister, I would state, but I would state it as a women activist rather, with pride, with how much dedication, which included yourself, Salehi Saab, Rahila Jan, Mahbooba Jan, and all the other female friends who are today participating here. I think justice is a very big word if we start talking about today in the situation of women in Afghanistan, to take it up from a very simple word, which is mobility. Rather, we can analyze it more with the justice, because the first thing which the present de facto structure did was demolishing of all the addresses through which women had an identity, whether it was Women Ministry, whether it was Human Rights Commission, whether it was women-led organizations. So for getting to justice, I think we need an address. Today, all the addresses which give confidence to women to come and to discuss, to elaborate, at least to write, they all have been closed. So we cannot even aim for getting access to just informing about the justice. And the other thing is, to be very honest, I think, which world are we living in? Just imagine, like, from a girl child, stopping them from school, to a woman in decision making, if we consider social, political, economical, and cultural issues. Mobility is social. Women have no access. Economical, they are stopped from work, no money. Political, their addresses are demolished, stopped. Cultural, all of us are Afghan prejudiced women. You, me, Shabnam, Raila Jan, Malia Jan, everyone. What is the niqab that they are culturally trying to impose on women of Afghanistan? So there is no single basis of what we say that they aim to at least give a respect, and then further to respect when they put a step in and then they want to contribute to the development of Afghanistan. As a woman who has really struggled, first 2 decades of my life as a refugee in Pakistan, with a full dedication and honor and respect to come and step in, and with each drop of my blood, in thousands and thousands of women like me, we worked. What is the result? What is the result? I, as a Minister for Women Affairs, so many of my international friends were unhappy because I rejected to evacuate on 15th of August. All of them know that I rejected. I only took the decision to leave Afghanistan on 22nd of August, where I really figured out that it was going to be a high risk. And what would happen after that? A condemnation letter that we are unhappy that the women minister is assassinated. So there is no basis, or there is no primary basis to talk about justice sector. Which justice sector? What are women doing? In offices, they are stopped. They are asked for their mahrams or for their male members to come. What is the capacity? Women have proved their capacity. They have proved to be leaders. They have proved to be contributors. They have proved to be respected citizens. I think there is no need to talk about what they have done. From policy to grassroots, they have abandoned all the windows. Today, I think, and I would also urge Global Diaspora Council, rather than discussing again and again the same things of what we see day to day in media, it is very, very important to step in and to indicate at least 4 or 5 very basic, primary, urgent action which needs. All the NGOs who are with very high risk, wanting to help still in Afghanistan, their projects are stopped. There is no funding for them. There is no resources for them. And then we are expecting that Afghan women are leaders, they are prejudiced leaders. Only pride cannot give resources. So these are all the things which we really need to discuss in today's discussion. I would just conclude with 3 points. The first one is, what can we really do at this situation with ongoing programs? How much monitoring is done to really see with the women organizations, with the women beneficiaries, with the widows, with the female-headed households, how much is getting to them? No, nothing is getting. Just today, I figured out, I was in communication with an organization who was distributing World Food Program support. I wanted to give them a list of some widows who approached me because of my contacts. And they said, no, the lists are given by WFP and then we just distribute that. Imagine what? Do we also want to analyze, okay, this widow is good, this widow is bad? A widow is a widow. A widow who has a problem, only she can understand her problems. So the second thing is the midterm solutions. I think where social aspect comes in, that is health.
We will come to that, Eژna. I'm sorry for interrupting, but we will come to that in the second phase, and you can discuss this in details, like what can be done. You just keep these points. You can discuss it later in details. I will come to Ambassador Thomas Nicholson. I might sound a bit. Personally, I am a poet in exile. I was living in Afghanistan, and I had a wonderful life there, and like thousands of others, millions of other Afghans, and well, frankly speaking, on a personal level, Kabul was the muse of my poetry. That is where I was getting this inspiration to write. Since I left, I'm writing very less, but I'm one of these. I will. Post-2001 generation. I grew up in Afghanistan. I went to the American University. We were like kind of this, we grew up in a different Afghanistan, that we were living inside the country, but we were exposed to the world. We had like direct connection to the rest of the world. And this assurance that we were receiving in the 20 years for Afghans, especially for Afghan women, and girls, and even one of the, when initially the international community came to Afghanistan, one of the motto was that to liberate Afghan women. But when it comes like today, we are not in that position. Personally, for me, and I'm sure like for million other girls, it is very difficult to grasp that. Our international friends, that we used to call that, left us in the middle, like in half of the way. When you were speaking with the Taliban previously and even now, what were you talking? Like, what is your points on women's rights, or this like for the negotiations, and how do you kind of like assure us that we can trust you again? I don't mean to be rude or anything, but it's very difficult. Do you see what I'm saying?
I think I see part of what you're saying, Shafika. So let me have a try. Let me have a go. And first of all, also like to echo Richard's and others' gratitude for having been invited. It is a sad week. It is a week that many of us are thinking back on what things were like and what happened a year ago. I see it also as an opportunity, of course, to pause, to reflect. We have heard by many of you already how, and we know, of course, how things have gone bad in many ways in terms of the rights of women, rights of girls, rights of minorities and journalists and others. So this may also, we can of course focus on that, and it's important that it's a reality, but maybe a 1-year anniversary is of course not for us an occasion to celebrate, but perhaps an occasion, as I said, to pause and to also to think ahead. You asked me, Shafika, I think also what have the EU been doing before, and what were those 20 years and what did they mean? And I think it's important to look back, but I think it's also important to look forward. If we look back, from my perspective at least, there are different realities and different perspectives. Looking back at the two decades, some would decide to focus on progress made, not by the EU certainly, but by Afghans in areas such as improved literacy, better access to healthcare, reduced maternal mortality. I mean, these are crude, they are important statistics, but they do not capture what you mentioned, of course, being exposed to in a positive way, being exposed to the world and opening perspectives. Those who look at these things would probably point to better awareness about the rights of women and girls, the establishment of key institutions to support and defend those rights. And then you would have more critical voices who will talk about excessive donor dependency that wasn't sustainable, corruption built into or accepted under the Islamic Republic, difficulties in pursuing development objectives while a war was going on, the huge differences between countryside and cities, and between different parts of the country, and of course the way in which the US and its allies decided to pull out militarily, and how swiftly the Islamic Republic collapsed. I think it's important to take all of this into account, to recognize that change is possible. You're an example of that. Recognize that change cannot become sustainable unless it's supported by people, possible to be funded long-term. Acknowledge that Afghan society has undergone deep changes to varying degrees during the last decades, and reject firmly the claim that talk about human rights or girls' rights to go to school or women's rights to work or be visible in society are alien concepts imported from abroad, but rather that they are widely supported within the country by women and men, and that imposing values or norms doesn't come necessarily only from abroad, but can also be attempts made by Afghans against other Afghans, and that is what we are seeing for the moment. Our engagement with the Taliban, we do not negotiate, we engage, we talk. They are part of our continued commitments to the Afghan people. It does not amount to recognition of the Taliban appointed interim government or the so-called Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan. We have met the Taliban, or I have met the Taliban since June last year. And since the violent takeover of power, our foreign ministers have agreed that it is not in our interest or in the interest of Afghans as we see it, that we disengage. Sanctions against Taliban leaders remain firmly in place. We do not want to change that, but further isolation as we see it and as our leaders see it is unlikely to lead to positive change. What do we talk about? We talk about, we have 5 what we call benchmarks, areas that we find important. We talk about human rights, especially for women, girls and minorities in Afghanistan. We talk about the need for an inclusive government where all Afghans, men and women, have a chance to influence and have their voice heard and can be represented. We talk about humanitarian access so that indeed our assistance reaches those who need it, widows, non-widows in various parts of the country, regardless of who they are. We talk about the Taliban's commitment to counterterrorism, and we have seen recently and also before that we have reasons to doubt either their willingness or their capacity to live up to their promises. And we address the issue of what we call safe passage for Afghans who want to leave the country in an orderly and legal manner. We use every opportunity to push for these issues with the Taliban, and this pressure has to be maintained. Our engagement with the Taliban is necessary, as we see it, partly to ensure humanitarian assistance, humanitarian access. As I mentioned, of course, we do not deliver it through the Taliban, but through UN organizations and others. So even if we disagree and see little or no progress on many of the important issues, we think it is better to have this channel open rather than to close it. We have been disappointed, like you, on several occasions by the Taliban not honoring their promises. They broke their promise to the Afghans, they broke their promise to the international community to reach a negotiated settlement a year ago. They've broken the promises to the Afghans regarding secondary schools, access for girls, and to observe human rights. And Richard knows, of course, in much more detail and will report also on that. And we are sometimes criticized, and I understand that criticism, for continuing to talk to them. But most of the people who criticize the idea of talking with the Taliban, in my view, have not come up with credible alternatives. We are not going to go back to military intervention. We do not intend to support armed resistance. What are the alternatives? Where I think we may need to think further is about where we meet, the publicity around those meetings and the publicity we may give to the Taliban by meeting, and whether we can be helpful in facilitating also a dialogue or putting a dialogue between Taliban and other Afghans as a condition for meeting. Some of you may think that this is none of our business, and others may find it welcome. What is also true, I think, is that we cannot limit our dialogue with Afghans to dialogue with the Taliban. We need to stay engaged and support Afghans inside the country as well as in the diaspora. And we maintain a good network in that regard. I just wanted to mention also the Afghan Women Leaders Forum, which we try to support and facilitate. And the idea is there to give Afghan, it's one of many, and there is need for many. I don't think there's competition. If there's competition, is sound in this area, and I think there is a need for that. I think I'll stop there. And Shafika, I don't think I have necessarily convinced you. I have tried to explain what we're doing and why we do what we do. And from those of you who believe in dialogue, I would welcome ideas on how we can improve it. For those of you who remain skeptical, and I understand that, I would welcome concrete suggestions for what we should do instead. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's difficult for me to grasp what happened. And I'm, frankly speaking, I do not have the courage to think or kind of go back to the times and like kind of reevaluate what happened. So like personally, I'm in this kind of a very difficult mental situation. But a quick question, Thomas, how much progress did you make on this, in these benchmarks that you've mentioned?
I think that we have made some progress in terms of humanitarian access. We know, at least that's my understanding, that access across the country is better, it's easier since August last year. Due to the end, if we call it that, of the conflict, it's easier for humanitarian organizations and the UN to have access throughout the country. And there has been largely been acceptance by the Taliban about this assistance being delivered where, according to international humanitarian law and our own assessments and UN assessments of the needs. We continue to push on that. There have been attempts to influence, there are attempts to influence, but overall, I think that is the area where progress has been progress or respect or whatever we call it has been best. On safe passage, again, there are issues, as we know, there are issues around passports not being issued, bribes being requested for passports to be issued, people not being allowed and women not being allowed to leave without a mahram, and other issues. But that again is an area where overall and in many ways things have moved better than feared. On all the others, on human rights, which is a huge area, of course, on inclusive government, on counterterrorism commitments, I cannot claim that we have made any substantial progress. So again, if progress reached within a year would be our only criterion for whether to move forward or not, I would say we should not. But again, I don't really see alternatives, and we still think that these issues are hugely important.
Thank you very much. Mahbouba Jan Siraj has joined us. Thank you very much for coming. I admire your courage for staying in Afghanistan, and you have called upon other women leaders to come back in one of your interviews, to come back in Afghanistan and continue their struggle there. And I personally echo your voice, and I believe that being in Afghanistan will be more influential than doing a job outside the country. It is very, I found it very difficult. Sometimes I cannot speak about things that that are happening, or cannot give kind of advices or recommendations, because then people suddenly come to you and say like, oh, you were in that country and then you're telling us what to do or what to not. But at the same time, it is very difficult to stay in Afghanistan and work as a women leader. How do you see the situation, like as a women rights activist, as someone who criticized the current de facto government policies, and as someone who stands for human rights, and as a woman, how do you see that? What is your situation?
Good morning to everybody. It's really nice to see all of the faces, and you too, my dear, and Hasina Jan and everyone. Thank you for having me. I'm sorry I was late. I'm kind of running around the country a lot, of the US actually, not Afghanistan, but I'm on my way back to Afghanistan on the 20th. I've been here for about a month or so, and I got sick a few times and all of that. Never mind that. Afghanistan, yesterday, I mean, on the 15th, there was a day when everybody was kind of telling each other that this is the saddest day because it was the anniversary of the Taliban's arrival. In my mind, 365 days of the year 2022, since 21 August until now, have been the saddest days of Afghanistan. There is no one particular day that this is happening. This is what's been happening. Regarding the women of Afghanistan, there is a gender apartheid that is actually going on in Afghanistan, very, very officially. And I know the world is trying to help. I know the world is trying to talk to Taliban and find out, what is going on, but nothing is happening in that area. And the rest of it, I don't have to say. I'm sure everybody has talked about it. Mr. Nicholson said right now how it is. The world is doing their thing. I mean, they are trying. But at the same time, they are trying at the same way, the same old way, like the way they used to try before. But this is not the time to do that. I keep on saying that we really have to get out of the frame of work that we had and really maybe actually get something else, start doing something else. And one other thing that I was hoping that, again, the European Union, the United Nations, and everybody would do was to every few months, like every 3 months, they would take stock of their actions in Afghanistan and see what has happened, what has worked, and what hasn't, and do some changes and some tweaks at that time to see what happens. As far as the women leaders in Afghanistan are concerned, the women of Afghanistan, in one way, they're all leaders. I really don't like that word leaders, to tell you the honest truth. It kind of bugs me because I'm not that. I am just an Afghan woman doing what I believe in, and also being capable of doing it, because the way I do it, the way I look at it, I'm an Afghan first. I'm not a Pashtun, I'm not a Tajik, I'm not an Uzbek, I'm not an Hazara. I'm none of those. And I'm an Afghan. And then also, I don't belong to any groups. And the funniest thing is that I don't really criticize the Taliban. I don't know if you've noticed the way I talk to them is telling the truth to the Taliban, because maybe that is why I can say that. That's why I can speak about it so clearly and so loudly. I wish the Afghan women never had to leave Afghanistan. I wish all of those women, they were staying in Afghanistan. I understand the reason why they're doing it, why they left, but I wish they hadn't, because it would really change the whole face of this struggle of ours, because we are the voice, whether we believe it or not. The Afghan men, unfortunately, whether we like it or not, whether it's, I'm sure they all understand it, have accepted the way the Taliban are, have accepted the Taliban in Afghanistan, and they're going to be very fine with this. There's nothing going to come out of the Afghan men saying that, they don't want this or they don't want that. That I can guarantee you. If ever there's going to be something coming, it's going to be only from women. And from men, the reason why it does come is because, one, it's a group that does not want to agree with the other group, or with the ethnicity does not want to take the other ethnicity. It has nothing to do with Afghanistan. It has nothing to do with the well-being of this country. It has nothing to do with the fact that we are all citizens of this country, men and women, and we have to work for Afghanistan. It has nothing to do with that. And you will see it as we go on step by step. But as women, the women had this a bit differently. I thought we were all belonging to the human group of women, and to the gender, and doing the work for Afghanistan. And now I see there is a lot of change in that as well. So they're splitting, they're separating, they're going each in their own way. And that is going to make this country a lot weaker. We can turn to the world and say to Europe and say to the United States, for a long, long time, and start screaming and yelling that you have done this and you have to look after us. But how long? How long are we going to do that? This is the part I don't understand, really. How long? How long are we going to be just, asking them to take responsibility? How long? For a while, after a while, they're not going to. Because it's not, I know they've put us in this situation, there is no doubt. We put ourselves in this situation, there is no doubt. But we did it together. A whole lot of Afghans did it to Afghanistan. Look at the atrocities that happened just before by the previous governments, or we have forgotten about that. We can't forget about that. I will never forget about it. If Ashraf Ghani has a feeling that he can come on television and start talking sweetly and never say a word about what he did wrong, I'm terribly sorry. I listened to his speech because I wanted to know what the most knowledgeable man of the world has. But at the same time, I don't believe in a word of what he says. Although he did mention some of the problems that he had with the other groups in Afghanistan and what was going on. A bit of the truth came out after all of these years. But we all knew that. I mean, we are not blind, nor stupid, nor dumb, or are we? So, I don't understand this whole thing, how it's going to go. I really don't. My concern is really the Afghan woman at this point. When I was asked to tell, what the Taliban have achieved or what they haven't, I really couldn't care less what the Taliban have achieved in 1 year, because they haven't. Because towards the people that they haven't achieved anything and they've taken all of our rights is the women. And they have ruined us. They've destroyed us. We are annihilated. We are finished in Afghanistan. Now, everything we do in that country, we have to start from zero. From zero. From the way that I came in 2003 and we started working, that's where we have to start. I mean, I was with Afghanistan all of those years. I saw the growth of the women of Afghanistan. I saw the growth of Afghanistan throughout the whole time. I was screaming and yelling at the international community, at the Afghan government. Nobody listened. Nobody will listen. So we really now with the al-Zawahiri being killed, the money was supposed to be given back to Afghanistan. Now the money is not going to be given back to Afghanistan. What is going on? What are we going to look at the picture of the women of Afghanistan and the people of Afghanistan and the broad picture of the whole of Afghanistan, or we're going to look at the women of Afghanistan? We cannot separate these two. I will promise you that. These two are not separate, or we cannot separate it. How? So we have to talk about the whole thing. I was going to call these gentlemen. I was going to call Mr. Nicholson. I was going to call Mr. Richard Bennett, about the human rights. We really, what is going on, what the UN is doing. And right now, look at the work that the UN is doing. The UN is working, but UN is not working because UN system is not working. With their bureaucracy, for a whole year, my organization that is looking after 36 miserable women of Afghanistan, or right now there are more of them. I didn't get paid from UN, and UN Women is my supporter. Not because UN doesn't have any money, not because they don't want to give me the money, not because of anything, just because of paperwork, just because of the way the system is. Either we are going to change that, or we are not. Either the world is going to give all of their money to UN so it will get stuck somewhere, or they are going to maybe give it to some other organization so we can have an access. It will get to our hands. This is not going to work. The way we are going is not going to work. And I keep on yelling and screaming my head off and talking to everybody. Please, ladies, please, gentlemen, let's start looking at the whole picture of Afghanistan or the way you are operating. Just take a look at it and see where are the things we can change. Really, where are they? Like, for example, with the Taliban. Right now is our voices of the women coming out and say, don't let them travel. It's true. Don't let them travel freely, for God's sakes. They're not giving that right to the Afghan people. Look what they're doing with the passport. Why do you want to give that right as a privilege to them so they can go anytime, anywhere in the world they want? No, don't do that. Let them sit down and let them make it, that they have to choose who goes, who can go, who cannot go, who can go when and who cannot go when. Like the same way we are doing it. And they're doing it on us. I know that. These are the things that the world have to do. They have to change it. I know there is a fear of Taliban still with the Afghan people and with the international community, because I know the world does not want to blow up everything, because that's the last resort right now. I mean, Putin started it in with Ukraine. I mean, the man is sitting there and ready to press that button. His hands are itching. And this is the world we are living in, with all of these people with the power in their hands and a button under their finger and dying to press that button and blow up this whole universe of ours. If we don't really take a hold and stock of what is going on, in general, and look at the world from the point of view of men, women, children, as the being on this planet, for God's sakes. We only have one planet.
Totally agree, and especially some of the discussions that were raising, and as I have brought one example by the UNICEF, which said the denial of school, like the closure of schools, of secondary schools, has caused like $550 million for the Afghan economy. Is this like we are looking from women's rights perspective to the whole economy and political and social and cultural situation of Afghanistan? And thank you very much for this very comprehensive speech, Sarat Saib. I will move to the second session, which will be usually looking at what are the possible solutions. What can we do now to make the situation better for not only women, but everyone? And actually everyone is dependent on women. When a mother has a good job and is educated, her children, her husband will be having a wonderful life. So it is definitely in this way of raising or uplifting one person of the society, one person of the family, and helping through that the whole family. So we will be focusing on this part of the discussion solely on what are the possible solutions, what can we do, and I will start with Mr. Bonnet. You have mentioned other events and discussions that will be happening by the UN, and we have saw that some of them happened throughout the past year. Do we see any tangible results of these discussions? That is one question. And do you think there can be anything else, any leverage? As like, it's like, just imagine there is the group of people and then there is the rest of the world. The rest of the world is one side, and then there's just that group of people. That whole world, which is one side and believes in this and has this like shared values, has any leverage over that group to make them conform with certain rules, with and bring them, like make them take actions or make them change their mind, their policies, their behavior? Thank you.
Is that group of people? I'm sorry, are you asking this question for me?
No, it was for Richard, and I will come to you later.
Okay, sorry.
I'll respond quite quickly, if I may, and thank you very much, Shafika, for your question. And I just want to say I've really found it very fascinating to listen to the other speakers, all of you. And in terms of this second part being on the solutions, I'm glad you used the plural, because there is never going to be one solution. And I think it will have to be a step-by-step process, and I'm afraid it's going to be a very long and slow process, even though that is dissatisfying for many of you and for me too. But it needs to be, I think, piece by piece. You asked me the question about tangible results and is there any leverage? And I think already you asked pretty much the same question to my colleague Thomas, who responded to this in some ways. But I think, let me talk about one or two small things, and beginning at home with this group. At the beginning of this session, Rahela Siddiqui set out the goal of the Afghan Diaspora Global Council, and talked several times about building unity. I heard that the theme in what she said in her speech was building unity and building bridges. And I think that is something that's really important, especially when Afghans are now fragmented, not just in Afghanistan, but all over the world. So building that unity and a coordinated and coherent approach is something that you have started, and I think is an achievement. I think the same could apply actually to the international community. And I think would like to think that members of the international community are beginning to achieve more coherence. And Thomas has set some elements of that out. I was today in another event with journalists, and we were talking about the situation of the media, and including especially the situation for women in the media. And it was noted that even though the situation is very difficult, that journalism is still alive in Afghanistan, both in the country and in some cases from the outside, because it is threatening and very difficult due to a clampdown on freedom of information and freedom of expression. And I note and that Afghanistan dropped, I just want to say this now, in the World Press Freedom Index. From last year to this year, it went from 122 to 156, a country out of 180 in the world. So it was a big drop. But we also need to remember that a year ago, it was not number one, it was not 122. So this is a kind of reflection on what Ms. Siraj said, that it was not a perfect situation in 2020 or 2021 until August. There was a struggle. There was progress over 20 years, but we need to remember that it wasn't perfect. And maybe the drop in the World Press Freedom Index is maybe might be paralleled in other fields, that it was around 122, it's dropped to 156. It could get to 180 if things get worse, but we need to move it back even better than 122, and that I think should be the goal. There needs to be some kind of agenda. I also want to reflect on this discussion about with journalism in terms of what I think could be a possible way forward, and I speak from human rights perspective, and that is to make a business case, not only to penalize and threaten, but to provide carrots as well as sticks. I think I'm probably quite well known for speaking out strongly, and I'm going to continue to do that when I assess the terrible human rights situation, especially for women. But I also want to see where there are opportunities for progress. And let's think about news. Often we think about news, about the media, as somehow being critical of the government, and that creates insecurity in any government, not just in Afghanistan. Even though we say that it's an important part of an open society to allow criticism, I think we also forget that the provision of information is incredibly important for people's safety. People need to know if there's been an explosion, and sorry, they're still continuing, that's a dangerous area, maybe, at the moment. They need to know if there's been heavy rain, that there's going to be a flood, and need to take the necessary action. They need to know where to go to get the food aid or other aid that they need. So the media plays a role in as not only helping Afghans by informing them, but helping the administration that's there to govern better. And so I think that what we need to do is build what I've said is the business case for each of these human rights. And I've just taken one, that is access to information, as an example. But I think it can be done on many others and many other areas, be it rights for marginalized groups like people with disabilities, or the right not to be tortured because you've been there in a jail as well. So I think this is something, and I think when we talk about the leverage, Shafiqa, that you asked me about, let's look at two sides of this leverage. Yes, there is the issue of travel bans that Mabuba raised, but there's also maybe presenting the carrots as well as the sticks. I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Hasina Jan Safai had some points to add to the solutions and what can we do to move forward. I will give her the floor to speak about that.
Thank you very much. I think almost some of which I wanted to cover were stated. I will not repeat that, but I will just categorize ways forward to three main parts. The first part will be presently what is needed, because this is still a critical time with the natural disasters and with so many other, definitely with the structural disaster, with the capacity, quality capacity for public delivery. So the first thing I think we need to think about very urgent actions, which is definitely more monitoring on humanitarian aid, especially access to women, and how much the women organizations or associations or networks or addresses are involved through the process. The second one is definitely safety and security. It is everyone's right to feel safe. If they feel they are not safe, it is their right to want to evacuate, and the international community's responsibility based on the international human rights declarations to help them be safe, living with dignity as a human being. And the second part would be the midterm solutions or midterm way forward indicators is what is happening with the education. It has been 1 year. So what is being done? Not only, I think we can say that nothing has been done, but me as a mother of daughters, as someone who has worked, have really not seen any very tangible move in support to the opening of the schools. We every day see the media, we every day listen, we are in contact with women. That is generally, but specifically what is happening, we really have to know. And also about health. I have been in contact with so many doctors in the provinces, which I'm sure Mahbooba Jan and some of my friends who are in contact with, that they have not got any pay. So they are also human beings. They work to live. Who's thinking about these things? Hospitals, they are working. There is no, for example, medicine. There is no, who's thinking about? So these come under the midterm plan that they really, the present de facto structure has to be pushed, whether they like it or not, because basically that is for humankind and humanity. The last, and I think which is very much related to the first two, is a very coordinated approach of the international policy, you can say, or vision, you can say, or objectives towards Afghanistan. I think we are all the people who worked for the last 2 decades inside Afghanistan. Basically, me and so many of others like us, we never like to be dependent. But I think we all have been failed, and we are all a part of today's crisis that we were not able to, as public, as people, manage it. So how can we really think forward, like Europe, UK, US, Australia, everyone? I think there needs to be a coordinated, very clear, defined vision for Afghanistan. And I think I will not agree with some of the people who say that, oh, we are helping people. Okay, now, a nation is established for people. If the people are every day dying, if the people are sleeping hungry at night, so what are we doing? How can we really drink a sip of water wherever we are? It doesn't matter. So there needs to be a clearly coordinated, defined vision in 2 aspects. The first one is for United Nations. I'm happy Richard is here with us. We are bothering him a lot. We are criticizing, but we are also convinced that he will pass out our message to the policymakers, to the decision makers. And I'm happy Thomas is here. So there needs to be a very clearly defined. Now, once they coordinate, definitely the present de facto structures cannot move a step without resources. So at each step, there has to be a condition about the resources, about the mechanisms, about the monitoring, about the access, more specifically for women and for disabled minorities and everyone. And the last thing, I think, how can we really do that? There are so many scattered initiatives happening. I think we really need to do one collaborative initiative with only one basic indicator. And then following that, we can plan further. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. Saib, Munir has a question. Dr. Saib?
Thank you very much, Shafika John. I was planning to keep quiet and listen to distinguished speakers. Well, it is terrible that in the situation and at the anniversary of the events which happened in Afghanistan, just sitting silent is impossible. I, as everyone present in this room, is feeling the suffering and the hardship that the Afghan people are facing. And the important thing is that for first couple of months and even until now, lots of Afghan political figures and social activists, members of civil societies, they have been just shocked, and they have been in a position that they couldn't even figure out what will the next steps be. And even up till now, lots of organizations, political movements, and even public figures, they haven't found the right path towards tackling the problems of Afghanistan. And I'm very happy and delighted that today in this meeting we have distinguished scholars, peoples who are expert on Afghan affairs, and above all, they are holding positions in United Nations and European Union to help Afghanistan and to somehow facilitate participation of international community in the events in our country. And I, as a member of the leadership of Afghan Global Diaspora, have lots of questions, and lots of concerns, proposals, and there are lots of ideas to share. there are lots of ways and solutions that we have worked upon, not only in the recent year, but in the last 4 years since the foundation of the Afghan Global Diaspora Council as the umbrella organization consolidating Afghans who are living successfully, having businesses, having life, having families, having contacts and connections with Afghanistan all over the world, in Europe, in North America, in Asia and Australia. And I believe that will not be taking your precious time today. My proposal will be that if distinguished Mr. Bennett and Mr. Nicholson, according to their busy schedule, will set a time that we can meet together with the leadership of Afghan Global Diaspora and share with them the information resources that we have, and also our experience in the past 4 years, which will be of mutual benefit. And also I would like to mention that within the past 6 months, we have announced the existence of a new coalition called the Coalition for Salvation of Afghanistan, which consists of more than 35 political parties, tribal entities, and civil societies working even now within Afghanistan, in conjunction with international organizations who are members of Afghan Global Diaspora. This coalition have declared its existence, and the leadership of this coalition is located in Kabul. They are in contact with the Taliban, and they have put their goals on the table in negotiation with the Taliban. And we are looking as an alternative for military confrontation towards Taliban. These are the issues that I mentioned shortly, and I would like once again to request a future meeting between you distinguished speakers and guests of this meeting with the global Afghan diaspora. Thank you very much, Shafiqa Jan.
Dr. Seb, thank you very much, Dr. Seb. So we will come to Mahbooba Jan. Sarah, Mahbooba Jan, what should be done now? What should we do? What should the international community do? What should the Afghans in exile, in diaspora, or inside the country do? Your mic is mute.
I said that's the $1 billion question, isn't it? That's what everybody wants to know, exactly what to do about this. But, you know, this is really one question that that is something that we all have to decide. The way I've seen it now, as I said, we have to get a hold of the whole thing, just put every problem, everything in front of us, and just start all over again and say, all right, what is it that we want to do? And for that, it has to be the international community. They have to decide what they want to do with us. Because again, and I'm not saying it because I want to hold them just solely responsible. And Thomas, I think, you know that I'm a very, that's not what I do. But at the same time, I think the world has to sit down and decide. Just one example I want to give you. The United States was getting ready to release a part of the money or all of the money before al-Zawahiri was killed in Afghanistan. Al-Zawahiri got shocked in Kabul, and all of that decision to get the money to the Afghan people stopped. So this is what I'm saying. This is a reality we have to know. And we have to really sit down again. Please, Thomas, arrange it for the Taliban, for whoever you think, and make a meeting, because talking is very important. Let's sit down and talk one more time and see where the US and you guys and everybody is on Afghanistan. We have to come to some kind of a conclusion. It's getting very dangerous. It's getting extremely, extremely dangerous altogether. You know, they're taking pieces of Afghanistan with the Wakhan corridor, with Pakistan on one side, with Iran in there, with the China showing their muscles, with the whole thing. And Afghanistan is smack right in the middle of it. And I know as far as the importance of it is concerned, as a tiny little country somewhere in the Central Asia, but it might not even be. The importance of it to the world is really zero, honestly, on the scale of and the big scale of things. Let's not think that Afghanistan is the end of all and a beginning of all things in the world. It's not. We are one country amongst the 200 and something countries of the world. Look at the way things are going on in Africa. Look at the way things are going on in South America. Look at things are going on in all of Asia. I mean, it's not that we are it, and we should not really think like that. We are just a tiny little country, but with only some differences. And that one difference is that geopolitically, we are kind of located in a situation, in a place where we are important. And if the world does anything, Shafiqa John, for us, for the Afghans, it's not going to be because of your and my beautiful eyes. In all of our eyes, no. They're going to do it if it is good for them. So let's sit down and really once and for all, let's see what is good for the world. How much the world is really willing to do it. Not destroying us, because so far this is all what we have seen. 20 years of a democracy that the world gave us, and then I saw it in 24 hours on August 15 die. In front of my eyes, it died, and it never came back. So what is it? What kind of a thing are we doing? The world is willing. And I keep on calling on the world because I know that's where it is. They have to decide first what they want to do with Afghanistan, honestly. Not forgetting the fact that right now the women of the world are very much aware of the Afghan women. That's the one big plus that we have. The people of the world in general, I'm not talking about the governments, I'm talking about the people, are very much aware of the Afghans and what is going on in Afghanistan. And that's going to make a change because they are the ones that they vote at the end of the day for whoever that gentleman is going to be sitting at that table, you know, running the country. So please do, because I'm very much for talking. I'm still for discussions, for meetings, for talking about things. I still believe that if we do not talk to each other, we are not going to get anywhere. We have to talk to each other. It's not, we cannot just not talk. It's not going to happen. These are realities. The realities, we are supposed to see it, and then we are supposed to find a way on how to try to solve it. But at the same time, we have to talk about it. We have to make the world sit down at a bigger level. I don't know how they're going to do it, but at the level of the decision makers. Taliban has to be involved in that meeting with the people of Afghanistan. Let's sit down again across the tables from each other. I know everybody very much, you know, criticized the Norwegian government when they brought the Taliban to Norway. Of course, their big mistake was that they sent a private plane to them. You know, they shouldn't have sent a private plane to the Taliban. But anyways, I mean, that sitting across the table and talking, it was important. Let's give an importance like that, because the ones that happened was happening in Doha. You know, that group of people talking in Doha with those four lovely ladies of Afghanistan representing all of us was wrong. That was not what Afghanistan was, and that was not, those people were not representing Afghanistan. And you know that, and I know that, and we all know that. Asina John knows that, even though she was with the government at the time. We all know that. We all talked about it. What was that? What was that meeting? What were they doing? What were they deciding? If there's going to be something like that, no. So, but let's sit down and let's talk. Let's talk. Let's talk and see where we are one more time and see what we can do about this. We cannot go on like this. The people of Afghanistan, as resilient as they are and as amazing as they are not going to last, very, very long, being able to find a way. It's just not going to happen. So to me, the number one is having a meeting. Let's sit down. Let's arrange a meeting. Let's arrange an international meeting, a big meeting with the Taliban. Let's make them sit at the table. Let's talk to them and say, come on, guys. And please, at that meeting, don't forget me. I really want to be at that meeting. So if you are going to have it,
I hope you will lead that meeting.
I'm telling you, Thomas, don't forget, this time you have to have me in that meeting. I have to be sitting there with all of these heads of the Afghan government, these big guys that they decided my life for 20 years and they ruined it for me. I want to sit with all of them and the Taliban included, because those are the guys that I hold as responsible.
You can take the initiatives for that meeting, and I'm sure you will be.
No, I don't want to think. I want you guys to do it, and I want the world to do it. But I just want to be there, fly on the wall. But I want to be.
The important thing that you raised in your speech was not only that organizing that meeting, but giving, but avoiding the repetitive voices that are that are like for decades or speaking.
Bring some new voices. Yes. Please.
Yes, we need some new voices and people who I would say bring some fresh perspectives to the policy making process and to the international discussions on Afghanistan. I'm seeing a few hands raised, and I'm also
that's all I have to say. I don't really want to go that far, afterwards, what to do, what not. Let's see if the world is going to take that meeting. That's as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you very, very much. Thomas, European Union has been, this is the question that has sent by a friend in the discussion. I hope you are with us. I can't see you. Yes, now I can see you. So this is the question that is sent to me. It's for you. It says the European Union has always been partnered with the United States involvement in Afghanistan. Now that Biden's administration is less concerned about Afghanistan, what is the way forward for the EU in Afghanistan?
Thank you. I think, I like to come back to what Mahbouba said about the world or the international community deciding. And I think there's a role for everybody. I don't think it's for the international community to decide, but I think it's a role for the international community to decide among ourselves, at least, and be frank and honest. I think many of us, myself included, I think to some extent the institution I represent included, are still living in the post 15th of August 2021 world, or post 2 decades of engagement world. And I really very much think that there is a need, as you mentioned, Mahbouba, to think afresh, to do things differently. For me, part of the EU's role and the EU's role in the international community when it comes to Afghanistan is to try to bring, to the extent we can, actors around the table. I think one example. I think if you look at the benchmarks I mentioned, we can't call them something else. If you look at the things we find important, if you then turn to the neighbors, what do they think is important? Most of them, I think, would short-term be quite happy with security in the way they define it, control of the various movements inside Afghanistan that may be a threat to the governments, and some improved trade relations. One way of looking at it is that that's a good start, and then other things could follow. Another way to look at it is to say it is disastrous unless there is also basic respect for human rights. You may say we should be more ambitious than that, but okay, that's something. and a process leading towards inclusivity and dialogue. Because if not, it will be very, very short-term security that will not lead to long-term stability, and that will be a disaster and things will go bad again. That's one of the areas where I think it's important that we try to keep a united position. It's not that security is not important. It's not that we should be against trade with Afghanistan. It may be good for Afghanistan if it's the right form of trade and for neighboring countries, but let's not forget about the other issues. So I don't think, I mean, like Richard, and I think none of you would object, there isn't a one solution. We can hopefully be part of the solution and play our different roles in the solutions that need to be found. I'm pessimistic, or I'm realistic, or that's the way I see it now, at least. This will take time. It took time last time. It will take time now to get to something. I was about to say get back to something, but I'm not sure that's what we should do, but to get to something that will actually be sustainable and work for Afghans. Mahbouba, I have difficulties imagining you as a fly on the wall, I would say, but I have no difficulty seeing you as being in a very prominent position in a meeting among many Afghans, and possibly then including some of the Taliban guys. And I don't think, again, that this will short-term solve everything, but I think it may be part of a process that could lead to something better. I'll stop there. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I will give like 10 to 15 minutes to, if friends have questions or suggestions. I see Tahmina Jan Salek has raised her hand. Tahmina Jan.
Thank you, Shafiqa Jan, and thank you for everyone being here, and good to see you again, Mahbouba Jan. So I noticed just some things that I understand, Thomas, the fact that the security is better is something that's being mentioned again and again. However, we are forgetting that the reason the security was bad was actually the Taliban. They were the ones the country were protecting, the roadblocks, the police roadblocks and the Taliban roadblocks. It was all because, so now they are in power. It's not because they have actually been clever enough to do something in the country so that the security is better. It's just because now they're in power. And I would actually argue that it started being somehow good, but it's going on the wrong direction, because there are many attacks happening and there are different terrorist groups in the country. And a very evident of that was exactly the leader of Al-Qaeda being inside Kabul. So this is actually a very alerting security, not only for Afghanistan, but for the rest of the world, that we should take serious and maybe change that narrative that the security is better in Afghanistan, because it's temporary. It's showing that it's going the wrong direction. And if we don't somehow be able to, I don't know, yeah, that's the question, how, but it can again become a safe haven for the terrorist groups, because Taliban does not see the other, like Al-Qaeda, they see them as friends. They don't consider them terrorists. And what can we do with that security when there's no freedom of movement for half of the population? They need to have a man with them in order to travel. So that security basically can only be used by men, so half of the society. And regarding a meeting with the Taliban, I think lots of meetings has happened with them. It's not because we are not talking about it. It's not because they have a travel ban. They're being invited to Norway. I don't see the outcome of Norway's meeting. There should have been something like, okay, we send a private jet, but what was the outcome exactly? And those who are invited, I agree totally with you, Mahbouba Jan, that they were not the only representative of Afghans, the women there. But they were also the representative of Afghans, a group of them, a very important group of them, which were the educated, ambitious women in the society. And those are the ones who have been silent and mostly hurt by this situation. So yeah, I mean, UN is having meetings, European Union is having meetings, everyone is having meetings, but it's a lot on, I don't see any outcome. I only see the situation getting worse. So I think what's important is also that it should be so condition based and very result orientated and very strategical, and not just these meetings we're having and taking smiley pictures with them, kind of promotion of normalizing the situation. So what we need is maybe a pause and yeah, exactly, thinking fresh, rethinking, and having a strategy, clear-cut strategy that what is it we want in very condition-based meetings, not just ad hoc, you know. Yeah, some of the points. So I sometimes get a bit I wouldn't call annoyed, but the fact that the security is being mentioned as a good thing. Which yeah, thank you. I will not take more time.
Thank you. Thank you. I think Thomas has something to say.
No, thank you. No, I would be annoyed. So I don't think that's. I think there would be a problem if we were not annoyed about many things. So, but no, I just wanted to say what you mentioned about security. I have, I think, rarely failed to mention to the Taliban when they take pride in the reduced number of civilian casualties that say, you know, after all, looking at UNAMA reports, at least 2/3 of those you were responsible for before. So that's that you were not the only ones, but you were a significant part of the problem, and now you claim to be the only solution. The other thing which I just wanted to mention, and I say nothing new to the panel here, but it's an important issue, I think, and that is you have violence in the street, but you also have violence inside the homes. And the domestic violence, again, I will not attribute it all to the Taliban, but I think if you restrict the freedom of movement of people, if you put additional burden on men for being actually the guardians or the mahrams and responsible for the way the women behave and dress and all the rest, if you do not allow the women to go outside the home to work, it gets very condensed. It's not an excuse. It's not in defense of what's happening. But I think that's another part of the violence that is not easily captured in UNAMA statistics, but that is something that you are aware of, and I think we also need to perhaps speak a bit more publicly about. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was a great honor being moderator of this wonderful discussion. Thanks to our panelists, Mahbouba Jan Siraj, Hasina Jan Safai, Ambassador Thomas, and Richard for joining us in today's discussion. I hope we will continue and such discussions in the future, and a big thanks to the Afghan Diaspora Council. So this was all for today. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day and night.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your